Hello Dragonfly Swarm and welcome back to my ASMR channel. Raiden Shogun and Chevreuse are back on the limited banners in 5.0 Genshin Impact, and it should be no secret that they're sharing a banner together for a very good reason. It's been discussed before that Chevreuse is an amazing 4-star character who fulfills an interesting niche of buffing overloaded teams, but her value as a character goes way beyond that alone, and it only comes online that much more when she's paired with Raiden. So in this long overdue video, I will be explaining everything you need to know about Raiden and Chevreuse in 5.0, discussing all the intricate details of their synergy together, how to build them together, comparing Chevreuse to other buffers, and showing you their strongest teams as of 5.0 Genshin Impact. But before I buckle you in for this overloaded journey, I'm gonna shamelessly ask that you subscribe to the channel if this video helps you. Oh, and join the Discord server for future updates. Anyway, explodey ladies time. Chevreuse. Chevreuse is a character who provides quite a handful of utility to the team with things like overtime heals through her skill, AoE grouping with her burst, a hefty electro and pyro resistance shred with her A1 passive, and up to a 40% attack buff to her electro and pyro teammates with her A4 passive. All of which utility resides entirely in her base kit with no constellations. These buffs alone, and it should be noted quite importantly, make Chevreuse not only a viable support at C0, but a good one. For a 4-star Genshin Impact character, that's already rare as is, but it becomes a bit crazier when you consider her synergy with Raiden. The Raiden plus Chev overloaded teams are technically just glorified Raiden hypercarry teams, because while Chevreuse's emphasis on overloaded damage does make up an interestingly large amount of damage in the team, her main value provided to Raiden is still the electro resistance shred and the 40% attack buff, which works to massively increase Raiden's personal damage output. It's also especially interesting to note that Raiden has an easier time making use of attack percent bonuses anyways, because her best hypercarry builds oftentimes forgo attack sands for ER sands, and thus even with someone like Bennett on the team, it takes a notable amount more effort for Raiden to begin losing value from such attack bonuses. In return for all the buffs provided to her by Chev, Raiden herself provides a massive personal damage as well as a huge battery potential for Chevreuse and her teammates. And while Chevreuse's burst alone is generally not that big of a deal to maintain, her teammates' bursts are often very necessary and very difficult to maintain without someone like Raiden to battery. Take for example Xiangling, who works amazing in this team as a sub DPS and pyro applicator, who can help to consistently keep Chevreuse's overload buffs up. She makes great use of Raiden's battery potential, which allows her to instead focus her build on more offensive stats for higher DPS. Any inconsistencies that Chevreuse's best teams might face with energy requirements and overload buff uptime are effectively completely eliminated by Raiden's utility, making the teams trivially easy to execute while simultaneously massively increasing their total damage potential. It should also be noted that in every aspect, Chevreuse is extremely easy to invest into for Raiden. In terms of builds, she really only needs HP to come online, and in terms of constellations, everything she needs to enable Raiden in these overloaded teams is available to her at C0. And while it is true that C0 Chevreuse will not generally outperform other more expensive Raiden hypercarry teams, she's still often competitive, which is a huge testament to her strength despite being so simple to invest into. With constellations though, most notably with her C6 elemental damage buffs, which can reach a massive 60%, Chevreuse becomes a more competitive support for Raiden than even Kazuha in most regular cases. Do note that this does not mean that C6 Chevreuse will always outperform Kazuha, especially in scenarios where you're faced with AoE combat, or if your Kazuha has significant investment with constellations or his signature weapon, but she will be stronger for Raiden than most typical regular investment Kazuha scenarios. Which leads me into a short comparison I would like to visualize for you, in order to put into perspective where exactly Chevreuse stands as an enabler for Raiden, when compared to someone as notoriously strong as Kazuha or C6 Kujo Sara. When comparing two rotations against the same boss, I ran one Raiden team with my C6 Kujo Sara, C6 Bennett with Aquila Favonia, and C6 Kazuha with R2 Freedom Sworn. This team comp is generally seen as one of Raiden's strongest hypercarry teams, and mine is particularly wildly invested.
Fallen leaves, adorn my night.
I'm going in! No turning back! Strike! Torn to oblivion! Only...
On the other hand, we have my Raiden team with C0 level 70 Chevreuse, with a 3-star polearm, the same Bennett as the other team, and a C6 Xiangling with Staff of Homa.
Hands where I can see 'em! Don't let everybody stand back! Now you shall perish! Only...
As you can see, despite losing two of her most dramatically effective supports and being replaced by a bare-bones Chevreuse, the utility she provides alongside Bennett allows Raiden to still output significant personal damage, and overall with Xiangling and Overloaded, the total team DPS ends up remaining surprisingly similar to the Whale Raiden team I showed previously. This should help put into perspective just how wild it is that even a C0 Chevreuse with minimal investment is able to help upkeep this team's DPS to the extent that it remains respectably competitive with a total Whale team. And so with that in mind, you should keep in mind that Chevreuse is an extremely cost-effective alternative to essentially enable Raiden hypercarry teams without any difficult rotational or investment requirements, and at C6 she becomes completely competitive with, and typically the better option above, far more expensive hypercarry teams at Raiden's disposal. But now that does beg the question, how exactly do you build your Raiden and your Chev for each other? Well, as I've explained several times now with other aspects of their synergy, it's easy. Your Raiden will want to run her typical personal damage build with 4-piece Emblem of Severed Fate, using an ER % or attack % sands, an Electro Goblet or an Attack Goblet, and a Crit Circlet. Her stats are quite variable depending on what stats she's receiving the most of, so you should note that you'll typically find more value using her main stats for Electro Damage or ER instead of attack %, since many of her teammate options in the Chevreuse team already provide so many attack bonuses. With weapons, you're either going to want to run her signature Engulfing Lightning or the Catch, and I'm sorry for anyone who has to go fishing for R5 Catch, but unfortunately it's an amazing free-to-play weapon. Though I suppose you can use other DPS-oriented polearms if you don't have her signature and you really don't want to farm for the Catch. And for Chevreuse, as if it couldn't get any easier than building DPS Raiden, Chevreuse literally just wants HP on this team. 4-piece Noblesse can be good on her if no other teammate is using it on the team, but 4-piece Song of Days Past can also be quite good for buffing Raiden's damage in this team. And while there are actually a decent amount of other 4-piece sets that can work to provide good utility to the team, you can always simply default to running 2-piece HP sets. With main stats, you'll really just need HP % on all 3 pieces, unless you're running a damage-focused Chevreuse build, but this guide will not be covering that build, so don't worry about that. Our focus here is simply to reach her 40k HP cap for the attack buff she provides, and if you've already reached that threshold, you can then sacrifice certain HP-oriented gear for other equipment that provides more team utility, or things like that. For example, you could run a heal % circlet on her for more significant healing. The same sentiment can be respected when choosing your weapons for Chevreuse as well. Your Raiden will battery the team very well in almost all cases, so generally you won't need Favonius Lance, but it is an option, and for similar reasons, so is Rightful Reward and Desert Sages. But the real star of this weapon choice is Black Tassel. This is because it still remains as one of the only polearms in the game that provides a huge HP bonus regardless of refinement level, and it's a 3-star polearm. This alone will allow Chevreuse to reach her HP thresholds far easier, and it was already very easy. All in all with builds though, both Raiden and Chevreuse are very easy to put together for the hypercarry overloaded teams, and Chevreuse in particular is so comically easy to invest in that half the time you'll be running gear and stats that she won't even make much use of, because all of her most valuable assets come from her HP and her passives. And that finally leads us to the culmination of all this juicy information, an explanation and showcase of Raiden and Chev's best teams together. As it should go without saying, Chevreuse generally restricts your team building to only Pyro and Electro characters, with very few exceptions, so that's what you should expect to see with most regular investment Raiden and Chevreuse teams. But there are a decent amount of variations you can make with this team depending on what characters are at your disposal and what minor playstyle adjustments you prefer. To discuss the absolute shining star first though, the Raiden, Chev, Bennett, and Xiangling team is not only generally the easiest and the strongest team variant to play, but it is also typically the easiest to obtain since it consists entirely of 4-star characters minus Raiden herself. This team allows Chevreuse to provide her buffs not only to Raiden, but also to Xiangling, who greatly appreciates Raiden's battery potential and Bennett's own massive buffs, and overall, the near-perfect synergy this team has with one another allows you to reach massive DPS ceilings while consistently maintaining overloaded triggers for Chev's buffs, and staying comfortably healthy with her and Bennett's healing. All in all, the team, even with a C0 minimal investment Chevreuse, will typically look something like this. As you can see, this variant is strong and very easy to pull off, and although there are several other substitutes you can use for these characters, I'd argue that this is by far the most accessible and one of the most powerful variants of the Raiden Chevreuse teams. Still though, there are other variants where you can substitute Bennett for characters like Fischl or Yaimiko to simply slap on a bunch of extra sub DPS damage, and there are also variants where you can instead replace one of your flex characters with Kujo Sara to double down on Raiden's hypercarry damage. The only issue is that making these kinds of changes to the team would require you to sacrifice either Bennett's invaluable healing and buffing, or Xiangling's much needed pyro application and sub DPS damage. These issues do typically get remedied either by the substitute's immense buffing potential or their immense damage output, but no variation of the team feels quite as smooth and consistent as the originally showcased variant. That does bring me to an interesting point though that I would like to discuss in order to close out the video, a topic that I almost never talk about: future theory crafting. Obviously we know nothing, absolutely nothing about the Pyro Archon's kit, nor do we actually even know if she'll be playable, and as a Hoyo creator I will not ever discuss anything pertaining to leaks, but I would like to point out that one of the only niches we haven't seen much of with Pyro characters is immense Pyro application, and Archon characters tend to dramatically fill niches that have yet to be fully realized. All I'm saying, and all I'm hoping, is that this could mean that in the near future this Raiden and Chevreuse team could see a brand new teammate that could immensely elevate its already amazing potential, assuming Mavuika ends up being some sort of crazy Pyro applicator with other useful utility for the team. Obviously, I don't know anything and you don't know anything either, nor will we know anything until Hoyoverse themselves say something about it, but it's an interesting thought to dwell on. All in all, Raiden and Chevreuse are two unlikely best friends who have amazing synergy with one another and enable some of the easiest teams to invest into while providing immense team DPS for whatever in-game content may be troubling you. But that's about all I wanted to say about this pair of explosive characters. And if any of it helped you, please consider subscribing and joining my Discord server. Alright, I'm off to go cause more explosions in the Spiral Abyss because, to me, that is true ASMR.